any entrepreneur, if you are considering starting a business or you are in the midst of starting a business, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable, because like being comfortable is like not a thing that you're going to experience again, probably like, I don't know, maybe the rest of your life. I started this business 9 years ago and there's still days that I'm like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I'm stressed out. So if you are not able to get yourself in the mindset of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, it's a tell for your ability to really grow and have a successful company.
Welcome back to Badass Women in Business podcast. We are super excited to have our guest today, someone who I've enjoyed hitting the slopes with, which I'm just going to have to say, we're probably going to have to post a picture of the outfits this woman wears, because there is not a time I have not been in a ski line where people are like, oh my gosh, that is so amazing. So welcome, Katie Spadoro. Tell us about who you are besides a flashy, great skier.
Thank you very much. I am Katie Spadoro. I'm from New Jersey originally. I have traveled and lived in multiple areas. I've lived in Florida, Miami, Florida, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is where I started my company. And now I am in beautiful Denver, Colorado with you ladies. So getting to see you all the time. I own an HR consulting firm. I work with small businesses. I'm very passionate about small business growth, and I help protect them from EEOC issues and lawsuits and things that happen when you don't have your ducks in a row, and you're just hoping for the best and kind of just putting some things in place, downloading handbooks offline, listening to everybody who's not an HR expert and kind of just going with the flow, which is something that I did when I started my business and was like, I can do accounting. I can't do accounting. Apparently, the government says I can't do it well. So I hand that off to professionals now, and I highly recommend passing off things like HR and accounting to experts.
I am still chuckling from what Cristy said about being on the slopes, because I've got so many stories, even one more recent about how outfit dysfunction can create chaos. But that's for another podcast and for another day. Katie, what does CYB stand for?
CYB stands for Cover Your Bases, Human Resources.
Like, how did you get into this? I know human resources is kind of like for a long time, I would have considered it as the redheaded stepchild of every company. So owners would get into some kind of an issue with employment and then realize, oh my God, we need HR. And I'm curious to know what your impetus was to create a company that is providing that support earlier on before people can afford to hire a full-blown HR department.
Well, yes. So I worked in-house HR before opening CYB, obviously, for years. And I felt like, we weren't really getting an opportunity to make a change or make a difference, because having that position at the company was just to say that they had that position. So we would come up with ideas and tell them things that they should and shouldn't do, like asking crazy, inappropriate questions in interviews. And the guys would just keep doing it. And I realized that if I stick around, that I'm going to be the one, because they're going to say, when they get an EEOC charge, they're going to say, who's there with you? And you're going to be like, oh, my HR girl, Katie. And I don't want to be involved in you asking somebody if they're pregnant or what kind of car they drive or crazy other questions. So when I left, I moved to Tulsa, and I was living there for, I don't know, only a couple months, that I met so many friends and new people that own small businesses. And I would ask them questions like, who does your HR? And they would say, my mom. Or like my favorite one was that like my daughter, who failed out of Fashion Institute, runs my HR and my payroll. And they didn't really understand the difference, a lot of them, between payroll and HR, because they were such small businesses. They'd never worked in corporate America. They'd, worked for their parents' family company, and now they own the company. And they just didn't really understand the impact and need for HR until, we chat a little bit, and I would just educate them. It's not really a hard sell on our end, in the sense that if you have employees, you need HR, period. You need some sort of HR. You need a hotline. You need a basic handbook. You can't trust everybody. Everyone loves everybody. That was what one of the issues was with the family businesses that we specialize in, these small, family companies. And they'd say, well, we only have 40 employees. We're a family-owned business. Everybody loves everybody. And then they'd call us, 6 months later and be like, hey, Susie is suing me. So can you help with this? And I would be like, well, now I can help you call your attorney because you've already done the thing I would have told you not to do. But in the future, I could definitely help you avoid the situation. So getting something in line where the stop between Google and your attorney, essentially. So you stop Googling things like when I Google that I have a headache and it tells me I'm going to die. Don't do that with HR questions. And then, the next worst option is you're kind of just guessing. And then there's so many little intricacies and areas of gray in HR. So you're kind of just guessing and you're trying to do your best and you don't do it exactly right. And then you're calling your attorney to try to undo it, which many times they can't undo it. So that's it.
Katie, you talk about small businesses and you kind of threw out like 40 employees. I find that businesses that have 10 employees or less, they're like, why? Why do I need an HR department? And I would be curious to have your take on when is the right time for someone to seek out HR specialists and professionals versus just keeping it in-house and having your daughter that failed out of fashion school be the HR person?
Great question. So if you have employees, period, you need something in place. I would like to say that if you have, a few employees that aren't in your family, if you have 2-3 employees that are not family members, that you want to have a basic handbook in place. If you're planning to grow your business, that is a major sign. So if you're planning to grow your company, you need processes in place. If you're planning on expanding in any way, if you're planning on hiring, you want to make sure you have a hiring standard operating procedure in place. You're handing out the proper new hire documents. You completely understand why you need to do an I-9 and complete one and how you do it, and that it's a 2-part process and that it can't be stored with your employment files directly. And there's just ways to avoid massive fines, but you need to know what you're doing to do that. No one will learn the experience that my team has over years and years and years of doing HR by reading an article or, even reading an HR book. It's completely different. So I would say the smaller, the better. The less expensive it is to get something in place, the more cost effective, the more timely, versus, putting something in place for somebody with 5 employees. We have specials, we have an HR in a box, things like that for 5 employees. If you wait and put it off until you have 25 employees, I can guarantee you that rolling out a policy to these employees that are already set in their ways at 25 employees is going to be extremely challenging. So putting the little pieces in place right now is definitely the way to go.
Truer words have never been spoken. So, Katie, you know as well as I do that HR and bookkeeping are seen kind of like non-producing departments. So a lot of people put off getting a bookkeeper and getting an HR person that is specialized in those domains because they see it as a cost versus a producing department like sales and marketing that have a clear ROI. What's the ROI in HR?
So that's a great question. So honestly, obviously, we do not fall under the sales category. And, you have to spend money to make money, which as an entrepreneur, I, go through that same process and say, listen, what am I spending this money on? But the same question would be, are you going to get insurance? Do you drive cars? Are you going to get insurance for the cars? Or you're just going to hope, that Johnny driving to get donuts for lunch isn't going to kill somebody on a road. So it falls in line with preventative, proactive steps that you have to take to grow your company successfully and to scale your business. And it doesn't necessarily pay. We don't bring in sales, like you said, but it pays in the long run in the sense that if you don't have HR in place, one stupid mistake or one bad hire can completely take your company out. So, you make a mistake when somebody comes to you and asks you about they're being harassed. What do you do? And your manager says, hey, just toughen up and get back to work. It's fine, right? You're fine. Like that by itself is a huge potential lawsuit. So your managers need to be trained. You brought your managers on so you could trust them and you could step back, and not giving them the tools to properly handle issues like that. You're setting yourself up for failure.
I would imagine too that, providing some kind of a process and foundation for your employees would lead to retention and a better work culture.
For sure. So employees, we think of them like children in the sense that they want to know what's right and wrong, and they want to know what the limit is, and they don't want to be guessing. So, they come in late for work and it's 2 minutes late, and that's okay with your company. You're a little flexible there and you're fine. But then when they come in 4 minutes late, you're writing them up. And you have that written nowhere. You don't have the documentation anywhere. And they go, well, I didn't know what to do. You didn't say anything when I was 2 minutes late. So why is it a problem when I'm 4 minutes late? So if you're not having those conversations proactively, first of all, you're the big bad business owner. So if that does ever go to trial, it's going to be on the side of the poor employee who didn't know any better. And as the business owner, you can't be naive in those areas. Like, you need to have those things in place. They're not going to feel bad for you if you accidentally do your taxes improperly, or if you accidentally forget to have your employee sign a handbook. You're the big bad business owner. That's your responsibility, and that's what they're going to look at it as.
A lot of companies use PEOs, and I think people don't even know what PEOs are. What is a PEO, and how do your services differentiate from a PEO? And when would someone need a PEO versus your services?
It's a great question. So a PEO, a professional employer organization. So what they do is they offer you the ability to get certain types of benefits for a great price. They do your payroll. They also offer you a HR professional, which don't fall for that. So they're going to say, hey, we can do it all and we'll do everything in one spot. And that's a trick. It's a great sales tactic, because they can say, don't worry about anything. We do your HR and your payroll and your whatever, your benefits, and it could be a great deal. It's only going to cost you $10,000 a month. And you have like 8 employees and you're like, $10,000 a month seems a little steep for all of those things. And I am not bashing PEOs. They definitely have their benefits for sure. And, for certain companies that have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 employees, it's a no-brainer potentially to go with a PEO, because they are taking a lot of the liability off of the company. However, as a small business, I did not have the best experiences working with PEOs when you have 5, 10, 20 employees. And it's because you're paying for things you potentially don't need. As a small business owner, I like the opportunity and the flexibility to choose who I work with. So just because you may be able to get me $5 off a benefit plan doesn't mean that I like working with you. And that's important to me at the size that I'm at right now. I want to be able to call you, feel comfortable asking you questions and things like that. I want the individualized attention at the size that my company is and our clients are. They want the individualized support, and you don't get that. So when you have an issue, for example, with a PEO, in my experience, and you have somebody crying in your office and you call the 800 number and they ask you to dial the 20-digit account number, and then you tell them the whole story and that there's a girl crying in your office, and then they say, please hold, and they blind transfer you to somebody else who then says, hi, how can I help you? Can you give me your account number? And then you have to tell the whole story again, and it would happen over and over. And finally, at the fourth person, I'd say, I can't repeat the story. The girl's going to have a panic attack. She's standing in my office. What do I do? And they're like, well, would you mind telling me what's going on? So that process is so frustrating to experience on the employer side, that I really wanted to provide that one-to-one HR support to these companies where they call us, we know who you are, we know what your company's name is. Our HR generalists are not overrun. They do not have 500 accounts each. They have a dedicated number of accounts where they're available to support them, and it's proactive. That's the final major difference, is the fact that in my experience, a PEO requires or expects you to have some sort of HR expert internally. What I mean by that is the PEO is not reaching out to you to proactively have meetings. We have proactive meetings with our clients. So we meet with them, once a month, twice a month, 4 times a month. We're able to recognize problems that are brewing, things like that a PEO, if you don't reach out to them, they are not proactively reaching out to you. So you are responsible to recognize, hey, this might be illegal, or hey, this is a performance improvement plan over a corrective action. You have to recognize that. Then you go online, you download the document, things like that. So when you're just learning, it's a lot easier and it's a better experience to have somebody that you can call that knows who you are.
If I didn't know any better, I would kind of call you the concierge of HR, first of all.
There you go. Absolutely.
And second, this is so valid, and it looks like you're speaking from experience, because your frustration is palpable with that story that you just told.
For sure.
Yeah. So you work with a bunch of small businesses, and I'm curious, because I'm nosy, of what are some of the recurring mistakes that you see small business owners make if they do not have HR support? And even when they start working with you, what are some of the things that you uncover that are themed in small businesses in terms of HR issues?
One that we see, and that we just saw, we've seen it recently, is we have clients that hire us for support and they don't utilize the meetings as they're supposed to be utilized. So we meet with you regularly because we need to be proactive. We need to hear what you're saying. We need to hear your strategic plans. If you're planning on hiring and firing, doing all these things, we need to be involved at that point. We don't need to be called after you fired the person and you've received an EEOC charge and now you're calling us. So the misuse of those meetings, and I think that unfortunately sometimes it takes something happening, like you fire somebody without including CYB within the process, you fire them and now you don't know what to do and you call us. And it's kind of painful for the client because they experience like, oh, wow, that's right. That's why we have this team to call and involve in the process, not to wait until after we do it. So that's a big one, is not proactively utilizing the meetings like they're meant to be utilized, but we get there for sure. And sometimes it's a little bit of a painful process, but most clients are on board. They get it. They meet with us regularly. They help us help them prevent problems from occurring. Other issues are just not having the basics in place. I would ask, hey, when has your handbook been updated? After I asked, who does your HR? And they would tell me their daughter from FIT that failed out. Like they would tell me that. And then they would follow it up by, oh yeah, I have a handbook. It's in my closet. And it's like from 1996. My mom wrote it. It's so great. And I'm happy that you know what a handbook is. And I'm happy that you have a handbook in place. My follow-up question would always be, oh, great. Have your employees signed it? And they would say, no, they haven't seen it or signed it, but I have it. And essentially, you don't have a handbook if your employees have not seen it and signed it and you haven't presented it to them. So it's little things like that you think you're covered, but you're really not. I-9s being a two-part process, that's a big one. So an I-9 is required to be filled out within the first few days of hire. It has to be filled out in certain color ink. They're really strict about it. And it's a two-part process. So I will ask about their I-9 process and they will say, oh yeah, we gave them the I-9 and that's it. And they don't understand that the employee fills out part of the I-9. The company is required to verify the I-9 and actually look and hold the documents and sign them and that they saw them and all of this stuff. So if you're only doing it the first half, then you're not completing the process correctly. And that's opening yourself up for a problem with the government. So just being aware of things like that.
I am curious. You have referred to this acronym quite a few times, EEOC. What is it, just for our listeners?
Great question. I do that sometimes. I have to remember not everybody knows the HR words that I use. So Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So they really are, if something happens and you make a mistake and you fire somebody that you shouldn't have fired, or you mishandle a harassment issue or a bullying issue, the first step is you're going to receive a letter from the EEOC saying, hey, we've been alerted that you terminated this employee illegally, and this is what they're saying. So we need to set up some sort of mediation. So the whole first step in that process is the company now has to mediate with this employee, which most of the time, the company doesn't want to have to go to trial because they know that they didn't do it correctly. And when that happens, they end up having to pay, obviously. They have to mediate about how much money they're going to pay this employee that was smart enough to recognize that it wasn't handled properly. So I don't know, I've seen payments from $20,000 to $500,000, depending on what the issue is, how long it went on. And it could be one mistake. This could be you handled one thing wrong and they think it's very serious that you did that and there's no excuse. So that, and then obviously if you're unable to mediate and come to some sort of agreement, at that point, you may eventually end up going to trial. And that's kind of what's next. So the EEOC is that first body that set to protect employees.
I could talk about HR all day, but I want to know more about you, Katie. What prompted you initially to start a business? Because that's like something I've read recently. Business is hard. Entrepreneurship is hard. Everything is hard. Pick your hard. So why did you shift from being an in-house HR person to wanting to become a small business owner?
There are lots of different reasons for that. One of those reasons up front is HR is an area that's very female focused. There's really a lot of women in the industry, and there's multiple reasons. Number one, having the opportunity to sit at the table with all of the men that run the show and actually bring value in that situation. So not just there because I'm a woman, I'm there because I know what I'm talking about and I have heavily experienced in HR. So they appreciate me being in the room. They appreciate me having at the table. So having the opportunity to choose what teams I work with is really awesome because they actually care what we're saying. They listen to us. I'm not saying they always do exactly what we say because that would be really boring. So sometimes they don't do exactly what we say and we have to have another meeting. But that opportunity, another thing was that there was not space for, when I started the company in January 2015, that women were able to work part-time in HR or be flexible and work remotely in HR. And that was a problem for me because I like to do other things besides just HR. I'm super passionate about what I do and I love it, but I also like to travel and, I'd like to have a family one day and I'd like to not have to drive to somebody else's office and sit there from 8 to 5 p.m. Twiddling my thumbs because there's no emergency going on versus the opportunity to work when I need to work and be able to have an actual work-life balance, which is huge. So that was one of the major things was that, women really were not having that opportunity and that's not really fair. So having the opportunity that what I'm able to do now to provide to my team is that work-life balance that really is work-life balance. They can work from wherever they like. They work on specific clients. They have the ability to have a life outside work, which I think makes them appreciate and enjoy working for CYB even more because they like being here when they're here.
You mentioned having a team. I'm assuming that even though your background is HR, it's still challenging managing and leading a team. So what would you say has been your greatest lessons or struggles in growing and maintaining a team yourself?
Yeah, it's actually, I think, made me a better leader based on what I do, having the opportunity to work with so many different leaders in different industries. There are some really general ideas that make sense when you look at them. But for example, hiring. So not hiring out of fear, not hiring out of, I'm so stressed out. I don't have time to do this. I need to hire somebody right now, and hiring somebody who's not the right person. Mishiring the right person can completely spiral your business. And it can get to the point where it's really hard to grasp it and get it back onto where it was. So I'm very much at the point that if my company or my team, somebody on my team is overwhelmed with something, I would 100,000% rather step in and actually help that person individually than I would to be, hey, just hire Joe Blow because he talks really well and he may be able to help. I know I can help. So I'd rather step in, help them. And then once the fire is put out, we create a job description and we find somebody that is the right fit for what that need looks like. So that would be definitely in the top 3 of things that I would recommend. What else? Leadership wise, not micromanaging. Nobody wants to be micromanaged. So it can be really challenging when you're hiring somebody new and you need to give them room to breathe. And again, it's like a child. So teaching them what to do and how to do it is what I'm here to do. I tell them up front, if they have a question, to come to me before guessing. I'd much rather have them come to me, get the answer properly answered before they present it to a client or to anybody else, but not micromanaging them. So once I've taught them a process and once I've walked them through the process and done it with them, or even Rachel, now my lead HR generalist, once she does that, we let you go. Like you can try and do what we just learned. Just do what you just learned, do what we just taught you. I didn't hire you so I can do your job and my job. I hired you so you could do your job and I have more time to do other things. So the micromanagement is huge. And now that we're remote, people will ask, I saw something the other day online and they said, how do I monitor my workers that are remote and make sure that they're doing their job? And one of the first answers was you trust them. Like that's it. You trust them. So you hire the right people from the get-go, and you hire people that you trust, that are honest, that have good backgrounds, that have a positive vibe at all times. And people like that you don't have to buy some monitoring software that you're checking every click on their computer. That sounds horrific. I don't want to do that. I don't want to know. I don't have time to do that. And so somebody even asking that question is kind of concerning, because it's like, well, listen, you shouldn't have to do that if you have a team that you trust. So that's back to the hiring, which is hiring the right people, taking time, hiring slow, and firing quickly, but not too quickly, before they say that you harass them between the time of you knowing you should fire them and actually firing them, because then you cannot really fire them, because now it's going to look like retaliation. So there's so many fun things, so many fun pieces that are surrounding leadership.
I appreciate you talking about remote work management, because I know your team is all remote and they're all women, right? You have an all women team?
I do have an all women team right now, for sure. And they're amazing.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
I love where you were going with like not micromanaging and also empowering your team to kind of come up with their own solutions once you've set them up with an issue. And I've seen you do it with your team very often. What prompted you to first hire your first full-time person? Because that's something that everybody starts as a solo, right? Or as a partnership. What was kind of the breaking point to where you were like, I can't do this by myself anymore?
Well, it's a great way to phrase it, because it was an actual breaking point. It was to the point that I thought I was going to end up in, a psych ward, because I was like, I can't do this anymore. And it also, my father's an attorney, and he spent a lot of time saying, hey, the contracting situation is the way to go as long as you possibly can. And you don't need to hire somebody until you're personally working like 80 hours a week. When you're working 80 hours a week and you're making that much money and you are that busy and you need help because you actually cannot do the work that needs to be done, that is when you hire somebody. You do not hire somebody because you're working 40 hours and you're kind of tired. Like that is not owning a business. Owning a business is you really are having to work through that adversity and that exhaustion and things like that, so you can get things in place. So when you do hire somebody, you can financially afford to do so. And I think that's something that people say, hey, I need somebody to help me, make a sale or do something like that. And they go out and they hire a full-time person for this role that they haven't even drafted a job description for. They just have this feeling that they need help in this area. And they end up with somebody who maybe isn't doing their job or lied about how good they are at something, or, you don't even know as the business owner what you need. So hiring an expert outsource, which again, bringing this back around, the first time you do it, the first time you feel like you have a need for HR or accounting or sales or things like that, I highly, highly recommend hiring an expert who is outsourced and having that person build the process properly. So you see how it's going. And this is after you have some idea of, you need it. So there's a good chance that you are, you're trying to do HR yourself and you're like, this is just not my jam and I don't want to do this anymore. And it's not my area of genius. And at that point you say, hey, let's talk to a few people that specialize in HR, outsource, and see what they recommend. So I don't recommend you hiring a full-time HR person on your own. You don't know what you're looking for. So that's a problem that clients come to us with is they'll say, we hired an HR manager, but she's not good. She's not doing anything. She hasn't written the handbook. And that's because you're hiring somebody potentially who thinks you already have a handbook and is going to come in here and be strategic HR with 5 employees, 10 employees. You don't need that. You need somebody who is going to help you build that HR infrastructure properly. So 3, 5, 10 years down the line, when you have to hire somebody into your HR department, you have everything set up properly. You're not just saying, hey, we have nothing in place and good luck, because you're kind of setting yourself up for a problem if you do it that way.
So you were at a breaking point and then you decided what on your first hire?
I decided it needed to be a contractor and that contractor would come in. I created the job description or the role description. I basically wrote down everything I was doing and I pulled things off of there that I just could not do anymore. So there's areas of the business that I did not have time to do or I didn't love to do them. And this person came in and helped me with that. They came in and helped me with, my original HR boot camp, one of my original contractors. She helped me build that out because she had the experience to do so. I didn't need her working at specific times, things like that. And once it got to the point that the position grew and she was needing to have a more available schedule and meet with clients at certain times and things like that, that legally that is not a contractor anymore. It required me to bring on my first hire. So the contracting option got me to the point of needing to bring on that first hire. But again, the legalities surrounding that are gray, like everything in HR, which is why I would not have been a good attorney, because that's very black and white. They're gray. They don't tell you, they give you guidelines as to like, these are things that contractors can and cannot do, but you don't really know if you're doing it right until you're standing in court and they're like, you did it wrong. So you really need to have somebody working alongside you to figure out what is right and wrong and do it right the first time.
So many valuable tidbits of information here. I cannot wait to share this episode with so many people.
Thank you.
I would love to know, what do you love most about being an entrepreneur and having your own business?
There's so many things I love doing. I love the opportunity to be creative and be in my zone of genius in areas that I love working every day. I love the opportunity to make decisions that impact, positive decisions that are impacting other people in my business, but also in other companies. I love the flexibility that I have most of the time, that I try to make myself have most of the time, but, being able to travel and being able to do things that I love outside of just CYB, which I obviously love tremendously, but being able to do other things like go on ski days and have that flexibility to create a work-life balance for myself and for other people that love CYB as much as I do.
Speaking of zone of geniuses, I know that, or zone of genius, I know, Katie, that, and I say it all the time, you're kind of the genius of implementation, because I've never seen anyone implement as fast as you do. But one of the things that you talked about and that you and I have talked about is like you being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Can you like elaborate on that?
That is, I think, like just your mantra. Any entrepreneur, if you are considering starting a business or you are in the midst of starting a business, you better get comfortable being uncomfortable, because like being comfortable is like not a thing that you're going to experience again, probably like, I don't know, maybe the rest of your life. However, I started this business 9 years ago and there's still days that I'm like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I'm stressed out. So if you are not able to get yourself in the mindset of being comfortable, being uncomfortable, it's a tell for your ability to really grow and have a successful company, because there are going to be days that you are just like, why did I do this? This is a terrible idea. I should have never started this business. I'm so exhausted and stressed out. And then on the other hand, most of the days are, I love this so much. I'm so excited and I can't wait to continue to do this. But it's that time period in between those two highs that if you are unable to get through those highs, that's why so many businesses fail within the first few years, because remaining stoic, that was something that somebody told me for, when I first started, was you have to remain stoic. You cannot get too excited when there's too many positive things going on. You cannot let yourself get too down when you're upset or you lose a client or things like that. Like just keep it moving. So keep focused on the goal and keep it moving forward, and just deal with the fact that it's not going to be comfortable every single day. I'm happy you brought that up, because that is my go-to. Not everybody gets it. If you're not an entrepreneur or a business owner, it's very hard for somebody to understand that. But because a lot of people are like, I'm uncomfortable, I'm just going to not do this. Like, this is not fun. I just won't do this because it doesn't affect their life or their business. But we don't have that opportunity. We really have to get through that situation, figure out solutions, and keep moving.
I think you just framed something really important. And it was interesting that you're like, you are not an entrepreneur if you cannot get comfortable being uncomfortable, like truly. And that I agree with you. That's why businesses fail, is you have to have that discomfort. And you also have to recognize that there's resources and there's things out there that can help you move quicker and faster through those areas of discomfort as well. And seeking that out is really what sets you apart, right? That's why you and Aggie have worked together for so long.
For sure.
You have that sounding board.
Yeah. And being coachable is like the second behind, like knowing that not everything's going to be comfortable and you have to figure that out, is being coachable and knowing that like, I don't know everything and I'm okay with the fact that I don't know everything. And the second mantra would be, knowing what you don't know. Like you are way ahead of the crowd if you know what you don't know and you're willing to ask for help in that area. So again, trying to tough it out and just like figure it out yourself. And I've done this, which is why I recommend not doing this, but trying to, learn things for yourself, trying to learn everything in HR there is to learn, trying to learn how to do accounting. Like I have no business doing accounting. Like I quit my accounting class in college at like the second class because I was like, I don't understand this. It's a terrible idea. And then I went on to think that I could do it for my business. Like that was not a good choice. Like, however, recognizing that I knew what I didn't know and involving the experts early enough really saved me in the sense that like, I don't know what I'm doing. So that is the second one in line, is being coachable for sure.
What makes you uncomfortable right now? Like, what is your zone of discomfort right now?
I don't know the answer to that question right now. I mean, it gets better. The good news is if you get through those early uncomfortability sessions where you're like, I'm going to give this up, I don't know what I'm doing, and you have somebody on your side who's helping you get through that and you're opening up and feeling like you're going to make those next steps. So luckily at this point, my feelings of uncomfortability are a lot more spread out than they used to be when I first started, year 1, year 2, year 3. It was just a constant anxiety, uncomfortability situation. Like there was just way more uncomfortability than there was comfortability. And at this point, I can happily say that it's the opposite way around, but it doesn't happen overnight. And it really does take that you working through those situations to get to the other side. You cannot go around them. You have to deal with it head on, face to face, manage them, accept that you made mistakes, accept that you're not always right, you don't know everything. So, I mean, uncomfortability wise, I don't even want to say this because I'm knocking on wood that I don't want to say it, but like at this exact moment, not much. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. So I think about that on a daily basis.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And follow up to that, what's the vision for CYB? Like where do you want to take this? And at which point do you decide I made it?
I don't know, based on my personality and who I am as a person, that I will ever be able to just sit back and say, I made it. I'm just not going to do anything else forever. And that definitely runs in my family. I mean, my father is very similar to that. So, I mean, my vision for CYB is that we continue to grow. We continue to help other small businesses get their ducks in a row and continue to bring on super expert, high level, high energy HR generalists and HR assistants to support these businesses and continue to grow in that area. There are multiple different ways really that we are looking at growing the company. And I'm not really at liberty to talk about all of them right now, but growing the company in a way to support different areas of the business is one of those ways. So, being a back office solution to a lot of these growing businesses in different areas, not only HR. I think eventually I just want to be able to be the creative side of this. So right now I really guide a lot of the business development and the creativity. And I love that. Like I would love to continue doing that for a long time, and being able to help guide the growth of the company overall while we bring on other kick-ass women into the team.
Growth, growth, growth.
Yes, for
That's
sure.
what it's all about.
For sure.
I love that you're also finding ways to elevate yourself so you can still keep the joy and passion and leveraging other people for the areas that you feel are not the things that make you excited. If someone is just starting out as an entrepreneur, what advice, besides getting comfortable being uncomfortable, would you give that person that allowed you to start a business back in 2015 and still be grateful and joyful for the work that you do today? What advice would you give someone?
Are you sure? Would probably be the first question I'd ask them, is like, are you sure you want to do this? Because this sounds like a great idea, but like it is not always a great idea. And that's actually, somebody close to me said that to me when I wanted to start my business, and it really pissed me off. I was really irritated and I was like, why? Because you think I can't do it. And the reality is she was just really jaded and stressed about the fact that she had grown a successful business and she knew what I was getting myself into. So she was like, are you sure you want to do that? So yes, I was sure, obviously, that I wanted to do that. So I think the best piece of advice is, follow your gut. And if you know you want to do something for yourself and you have a really good idea about that, follow your gut, but also be open the support because you're going to need it at some point. You know, you're not going to be able to do this entirely by yourself. That's the nature of the business. So being open to support, being open to knowing what you don't know, and being stoic, being positive, even when it sucks. And you're like, I do not love this right now. This is really miserable. Being vocal about that and talking about it with people that you trust and people that can help you. That's another thing is I know my family and friends love me and they support me. But I will ask them a question sometimes, or I'll tell them a situation that's going on in my business. And they're like, wow, like that sounds cool. Like that sounds awesome. Like, I'm so happy for you. And like, they really do mean that. They really are happy for me and they do think it's cool. But in those situations, I'm looking more for somebody who's able to give me suggestions, which if you haven't been through this process and you haven't been an entrepreneur, they don't really know, they don't have any experience in that area to be able to actually guide your next step. So it's kind of like, thank you for loving me, but like, I need to know, like, what do you think I should do next? Like, give me some ideas that I can kind of think through. So, you know, bringing on experts in different areas and having them help guide your growth is definitely the advice that I would have.
It takes a village.
Yeah.
To grow a business. It's definitely not a solo sport.
No.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom in HR and also in entrepreneurship. This was amazing. And I know that you gave sort of a masterclass on a lot of things related to HR during this podcast. So I'm super excited to be sharing it with all of our listeners for them to learn from you and also contact you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We have our newsletter, which, you know, you can follow if you're interested in other HR tips and tricks. We're doing a wonderful webinar series this year. It's our first annual webinar series. We're doing a webinar each month, and it really helps you grow in your knowledge of HR, but also in business as a whole. And it's free right now, so come join us. And, you know, one of the things we're working on here is a community for other small business owners and other individuals who are interested in growing their business alongside me. So helping me help you learn how to grow your business, not only in HR, but in not doing the stupid things I've done in the past, and being able to move through processes quicker because you have people that have done it already to bounce ideas off of. So that's something we're working on as well. And I'm really excited for all of those things.
And how do these people find you? This wonderful newsletter and webinars, and get in contact with you.
The massively influential newsletter that has been part of case studies, because Katie has 40,000 followers on a newsletter that took off recently.
Oh, stop.
LinkedIn influencer.
So HR influencer. I do what I can. So on CYB Human Resources on LinkedIn, you can follow us there. You can access the newsletter directly through my LinkedIn. Or I'm sure actually at this point that you could Google LinkedIn HR tips and tricks newsletter and that it would potentially come up. But that is a great way to learn the basics of HR without an aggressive class that you need to take. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. So that, and then I would, visit our website, cybhumanresources.com. Shoot us an email. You can send us an email at hello@cybhumanresources.com. But, like I said, I'm passionate about small business. I love learning about different types of companies and different industries. And I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Katie. I look forward to personally seeing you on LinkedIn as often as I do, because you're all over my page.
Thank you. So it's working. So I love that for me.
It's working. Hashtag algorithm. Thanks so much, Katie. Perfect. This was a pleasure.
Thanks, Katie. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Cristy and Agata.